I love my field, and I'm very excited to be able to do it. But one of the great things that I like about Illinois Wesleyan is that I don't just have to do U.S. foreign relations. One of my favorite courses here at Illinois Wesleyan is a course called The 60s, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. That has a question mark at the end of it. The reason I call it that is that I used to think that having that in the title would be a way of getting students interested in the topic, and that once they got to the class they'd find out that it wasn't about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but that it was about the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War and the origins of feminism. But what I found out after teaching it was that my students, who might not know anything about the civil rights movement or the Vietnam War — that's sort of ancient history to them if you're born in the 90s, they knew the music. In fact, they listened to groups like Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd or the Beatles quite a bit even today. And so they're interested in the topic because they want to know the soundtrack to my generation's life is also in many ways their soundtrack. And so I've changed the course over the past few years to incorporate more and more musical elements. I also teach a course on the Beatles called The Beatles and Their World, which I originally developed so that I could go to London and be the director of our London program, which I did in 2005. That course is really, in many ways, a course on the origins of globalization. One of the things I find very interesting — I've traveled throughout most of the world, and no matter where I go, you can go and hear Bob Marley, or hear the Beatles, or hear music from the 60s and 70s played anywhere. And so I got very interested in that. Why is it that you can go to Japan and hear a Beatles song? Or why can you, instead of hearing just Japanese music, why can you go to Brazil and listen to Led Zeppelin? The very first time I went to Brazil in 1976, I remember listening to radio, and I didn't understand Portuguese at the time. I had only had a 5-week course in Portuguese, and so I'd be listening to the radio, and the radio would be going on, and it would be going, yeah, 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 yeah. I couldn't understand what they're saying, and then all of a sudden they would stop and they'd say, Stevie Wonder. And then a Stevie Wonder song would come on, or Elton John. And then an Elton John song came on, and I was like, oh, I know some Portuguese, I know Elton John. But I became, because there are lots of Brazilian artists, why do they listen to a lot of British and American rock and roll music? And so that's sort of the origins of that class, is trying to figure out how rock music became the world's music.